you have to remember that in 1980, the Turkish economy only exported $2 billion worth of goods, maybe even less than that. In 2008, that number was, okay, you have to account for inflation, etc., but it was $132 billion. A tremendous transformation took place, but the most important thing about the transformation is the quality of the transformation. It's not a quantitative that's important. It is, where is the growth taking place? The growth is taking place away from the two main economic centers, Istanbul and Izmir. It's taking place in what we call the Anatolian tigers. And it created a new class of people who are, they may be conservative, they may be pious, but at the same time, they are willing to go abroad. They're willing to trade in all different parts of the world and trade with people they have never met before, if you think about it. I mean, Godiva chocolates, is owned by one of these very conservative society. So that essentially enabled the AKP to become, the AKP to become essentially a free market party like no other political party. These guys genuinely are free marketeers. The problem with AKP, and this is where AKP has not fulfilled its promise, and I would argue that it is not too late, is that it is not a classical liberal party in that it's market-oriented, but also culturally and politically liberal. It gets high marks on the market side, but actually flunks on the other two. It flunks on the other two because Turkey, in part because of this ideological baggage it carries, never developed real democratic tradition. Right? So AKP fell into the same trap every single Turkish political party has fallen, is that the leader becomes the ultimate. It's a one person votes once, and then basically he decides everything. There's no room for maneuver for the members of the party. They either salute or they get out. And the other thing is culturally. It has proven to be culturally insensitive to people who do not think like that. And I don't mean political opponents, whether they're in the military, but culturally sensitive issues. Whether it is on simple things like alcohol, right? Understanding that there is a very large constituency that doesn't think like them, and that they could not bring themselves to criticize or to show, and it's symbolically that was very important, to show that there was tolerance within their ranks. So in that sense, AKP has been an agent of change, but it is a limited agent of change. It still needs to evolve in those two categories. And here, and I'll connect it to the democratic opening since Steve asked me to do that, you see it mostly in its way the AKP approaches politics. Look, every political party is there to win the next election. They're not there because of your blue eyes or because they really like you. No, they're there because they have to win elections. That's what political parties do, and we should not expect AKP to be any different than the Democrat Party or the Labour Party or whatever. However, because it doesn't have a truly liberal ideological underpinning, and it has approached everything on a very instrumental basis. And the Kurdish opening, also known as the democratic opening, is one of them. Look, today, if you pick up your Turkish newspaper, you will find that many of those Kurds who had been encouraged to come home by PKK Kurds who were in Iraq, to come home and regain society, who were welcomed by the bulk of the Kurdish population in Turkey, today were arrested. I mean, they were invited by the government. The way the AKP approached the Kurdish opening, it wanted to do the right thing, but it did it in a way in which it was instrumental. What am I going to gain from this? Rather than how am I going to change society? Right? And in fact, just to go one step back, to connect with where I disagree a little bit with Professor Özbudun, in 2007, and Professor Özbudun wrote the constitutional draft, there was a chance after the elections of pushing for a new constitution. The AKP shied away from it because it was too difficult. Now it's shying away from the Kurdish opening because there's been a pushback Just it has shied away from other issues, and this is very dangerous, because if you look at what happened since the announcement of the Kurdish opening, which I thought was truly a great move for AKP, there's been one step. The government has stepped backwards constantly. A huge number of the new political party BDP have been jailed. I told you what happened today. Continuously, there are arrests in Turkey. 1 minute, okay. The arrests of people. Children are still being thrown into jail for long periods of time for throwing stones. Let me give you an example. There was a guy whose case is in Diyarbakir. He got caught in a demonstration, and he was whistling. And they decided that whistling was pro-PKK propaganda, so he was put in jail. He stayed 6 months in jail. They released him, but the case is still continuing against him because whistling is pro-PKK propaganda. I mean, but this is not the deep state or the military doing this. This is the government essentially pursuing the same policies that it was doing earlier. Now, let me connect all this. There is a great deal of change, no question. You look at the civil-military relations today are more normal than they were before. I think there's still long ways to go. The military is weaker than it has ever been in Turkey, but it is weaker not because of the AKP, because of the mistakes itself they made. They made mistake after mistake, creating a backlash in the country. Right? But I would argue that in the context of a failed democratic opening or Kurdish opening, if violence were to return to Turkey, you have a much more mobilized Kurdish youth today. The children of the people who were displaced in the 1990s during the war against the PKK now are everywhere in Turkey. In Mersin, in Adana, in Istanbul, in Izmir, you name the big cities. You have a lumpen proletariat, if you want, of 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 19-year-olds who are very angry, are completely, don't know where they are, essentially, unintegrated in society, and at the same time very prone to violence. There is a danger that with the Kurdish opening now being essentially closed, that we are in a worse position today than we were when the AKP started the opening, because all these expectations had built up. And now you're trying to quell that expectation. And it is, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's a possibility of a major backlash. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I open the floor to questions, there are a couple of issues I think that are worth exploring. Metin, you suggested that, if I understood you correctly, that the guardian role of the military is weakening, and that in fact you seem to suggest that the possibility of military intervention was, if not extremely, was either highly unlikely or impossible. I wondered whether the other panelists agree with that, and if so, why has the role of the military changed? Why is its political role now so much weaker